So I thought today maybe we could discuss your amazing legacy of out of body travel, your out of body experiences. And when I first heard you on the Coast to Coast show, I thought, who is this crazy woman who's talking about out of body experiences? And I didn't quite believe you, I have to say. But then I thought, you're a Catholic, and I thought, this is very strange. How come you haven't been kicked out of the church yet as some heretic or strange one? But
Almost happened, but not quite.
yeah, well, I know that part of it now too. But I'm just curious. I mean, the mystics probably experience out of body experiences, and I know now that probably a lot of us, when we have those moments when we're just falling asleep and you feel like you're kind of coming out of your body and you're like, no, that's not possible. And then you sort of, I hit the mattress and going, I used to take judo and think, oh, that's stupid. I can't leave my body. But in fact, if we think back, maybe we were flying in our dreams, and it was totally normal. But of course, we come back to a conscious state, and we're back in this body. So can you talk to us about your many years of out of body and what you've learned from all this, and from a practical mystical side of things?
Well, yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up because, a lot of people do have memories of the lucid dream experiences of flying. A lot of people talk about that. And what that often is, partial memory, not a completely conscious out of body experience, but a partial consciousness of out of body experiences. What I've learned over the years, it's been a long time. So, 30 some years now.
Wow.
What I've learned is, ironically, is that I would counter everything you just said with the irony that what I have experienced has made me really question the belief that a lot of human beings have, that this is abnormal at all. In the sense that I think this is actually the normal state of being for what we would ideally be in the human condition.
Wow.
Excuse me there.
You're having an out-of-body throat experience.
Having an out-of-body throat. out-of-throat experience.
Out-of-throat experience.
Yeah, and so, I've learned that it's very normal, very natural, and in fact, recently I was speaking with someone on a show, and I questioned whether or not we should even refer to it as supernatural. Because to me, it's totally natural. And what I am finding and what we are learning through the fact that, in the last 10 to 20 years, with so many medical advances of first of all, and thus, so many more people having near-death experiences as a result of the medical advances. And we're also I'm seeing and hearing from so many people who are having life-changing, life-altering out-of-body experiences that are not related to being near death. We're finding that this is not supernatural at all. It's actually quite natural. We have just forgotten. And so, when we realize this, what it provides us with the opportunity to do is to reintegrate an aspect of the human experience, which is vitally important, in the sense that it is the spiritual food that actually feeds our experience in the physical realm. And, it's interesting, too, because when you look at the studies that have been done regarding sleep, I recently saw some studies that indicated that it's a very short period of time that human beings can go without sleep. It's like, I don't know, at maximum it was like 4 or 5 days, and I think it was a lot less than that, but I'll just say 4 or 5 days before a human being would rather die than not go to sleep. They go a little batty.
Wow.
And I thought that was so fascinating, because what I have experienced is that during the sleep cycles, as we become more conscious of what's actually going on, which includes becoming more and more conscious of the astral and then the higher out of body travel states, you can look at this as like a circular process where the bottom of the circle is what we're experiencing during the day when we're awake, and the upper part of the circle is what we're experiencing when we are in the sleep mode and when the unconscious mind is at work and the spirit and the soul is engaged. And I believe the reason people go a little batty and the reason why they would rather die than not go to sleep is because this is the influx from God, the influx from the spirit, the influx from the soul, and man cannot live without it. It's
right.
Food. So, I've learned so many things from my experiences, but this is one of the big ones that I don't even consider it supernatural.
I'm glad you said man cannot live without it. That begs the question, can women? Just kidding.
No, nobody.
No, nobody.
And you even see this, you see this even in like the animal kingdom. If you'll see that they have the same types of cycles, that there is a need for the feeding in the unconscious state, that we require this. And if we don't have it, it lends us to imbalance.
So tell us about how you become aware that you're actually in these other astral spiritual realms when you're in that state, and why we kind of forget when we come back into the so-called conscious earthly realms.
I think there's a lot of techniques that assist with becoming aware. I'm going to go to the second part of your question first. The reason we forget partly is it's a natural state of affairs in terms of incarnation into the earthly realm. The forgetfulness is part of what happens as we incarnate, as we enter. One of the things I've reached,
which happens almost immediately as soon as you're born.
Right. And you'll see this with young, babies and then young children, that the memory is sometimes there and then it slowly fades. And one of the things I've learned recently as well, because I've often pondered this question of, well, if we're trying to work through, karmic alliances and things like this, why do we forget?
Yeah.
Now I understand it. It's because, most of these karmic configurations that we have are not necessarily positive. They're negative. And so it's important for us to come in with a clean slate almost, in order for us to actually go into it with a fresh new look and an approach wherein we're willing to do something different. If we remembered that the person that we're trying to come to atonement to brutally murdered us in our last lifetime, we're not likely going to reach towards reconciliation. The karmic ties that bind us, and I know I'm going into reincarnation here, which I'm not sure if you're comfortable with talking about, but
gives me the heebie-jeebie. No, it doesn't.
But I guess I kind of drug you in the cave, didn't I?
No, we can go into that at some point, because some people are able to do past life analysis and regression work, and try to clear all of that past stuff, so that we leave this earth cleaner, and hopefully that civilization of love is possible. But we have to do that work of cleaning the former karmic.
That's where the purification that I'm always talking about with everybody comes in. And a lot of people will talk about, I'm going to do a past life clearing on you, and the reality is that that's not how it's going to work. There is real work involved in atonement and reconciliation between souls, between powers, between between forces that have against each other in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are things that we have to literally create a new construct with these souls. We have to create a whole new construct. So it's not something where we can go through a procedure and those things are just gone. They're not. We have to do the work.
So construct also being maybe an agreement or a so the atonement, I guess. But anyways, construct is
well,
good enough.
Well, in the mystical spheres, you learn about construct and destruct operations.
Okay.
And again, construct and destruct is, can also be akin to something that is related to creation or destruction, something that gives life, something that takes life, something that is creative, something that is destructive, something that is moving forward, something that is moving backwards. So when we are working with darkness, we are working in a destruct operation. When we are working with the light, we are working in a construct operation. So we are always working towards creating new constructs, even in terms of societal constructs. When you're looking at societal issues, like, for instance, mass violence, areas where mass violence occurs, that's a mass destruct operation.
Yeah.
And when that passes through, the angels will come in and they will come in and work on refashioning the energy to bring in the possibility of a new construct. The problem then is that we as human beings have to take that potential and bring it into reality. And so sometimes we do not.
That's very powerful. I mean, that's that whole work of restorative justice and mediation. Yes. And I think about I can't remember there's so many mass shootings going on in the U.S., but it's that one where it was in Pennsylvania, wasn't it, with the Mennonite or Amish community, went in and they had, it was interesting to watch because they knew they had to do this work to, whether they called in the angels, but they had to clear and come to peace with this terrible situation. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was one situation where you really had a conscious awareness on the ground of the fact that they did not want to generate more destructive action. They wanted to generate constructive action, despite the fact that everyone would have understood if they were having trouble doing it.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of thing that happens. I remember years ago when there were the riots in Los Angeles after Rodney King. Was mistreated by the police. He was beaten up by the police, is what I recall. That's and right. Like 62 or more people were killed during these riots. And after this rioting was over, I was taken into the area of Los Angeles where this had occurred. And these beautiful seraphim were there. They were working on creating this construct operation. In fact, I wrote a song about it called "I Feel the Change."
Wow!
It's on my website, but it's it's about watching how they were forming this new constructive potential. And as you can see, some of it may have been realized, but a lot of it has been not realized.
So yeah. So what you just said was really important because there's a practical side of the subject of which is, you said I was taken. You didn't fly to Los Angeles. You went there in an out of body state.
An out of body experience, yes.
And so that begs the question: is if that's the practical work we have the potential of doing,
yes.
How do we get in touch with? I mean, you're having the experiences, you're taken and shown these things. Some of us may have those glimpses as well, but there's a practicality to that, which says, where do we go when we're called to these places to, exercise our gifts of love or whatever it is, right? Is a practical question, because there's a lot of turmoil right now going on the earth. And
Absolutely. Yes,
yeah.
there is. A big part of it for just, for the simple answer for the person who's just listening is to start praying for those places. And
Mm.
also, one of the things I focus on a lot is prayer for the dying and prayer for those who have deceased and those who are going through the afterlife experience. I pray for the souls in purgatory. The souls in purgatory are going through purification of their souls. And, and I also, it's so important that people realize that we are also in purgatory here.
Mm.
This is a purgatory realm.
Say no more. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we have that choice to engage in the purification process while we're here. So if we choose to begin this purification process within ourselves, we are literally affecting the universe and, eons and eons of worlds by simply doing the interior work within our own soul. And one of the easiest ways to begin that work is, you can start with reading some of my books. I recommend Come to Wisdom's Door and The Mysteries of the Redemption to people who are just beginning. I have a ton of books. They're all freely downloadable at outofbodytravel.org, so you can get them for free. But also, I highly recommend that you start reading books on mystical theology. And I literally just put up in our storefront an entire section on the best works of mystical theology. So why mystical theology? And primarily what I have in there is Catholic mystical theology. My favorite book in there is called The Spiritual Life by Father Adolf Tanqueray.
Yeah.
Another one that I consider to be one of my absolute favorites is St. John of the Cross, The Ascent of Mount Carmel. Mystical theology is the science of the soul. It's the science of self-purification. And so what it does is it draws your soul into an intrusive self-examination that allows you to enter into this purification now. So we stop wasting time. So many of us as souls, we wait until we die and we enter into purgatories, other purgatories, and we go through these purifications. And thus, this is why praying for people in those processes is so helpful for them. And I'll go back to that in just a second. But we do have the ability to enter into that process during our life here. And actually, that is part of the reason we are here. And that is one of the purposes as well of out-of-body travel, because it helps us to see energetic truths about ourselves. I.e., see ourselves through the eyes of God. So through the eyes of virtue, through the eyes of true eternal love, rather than just through our own shaded eyes, which are always a little bit misled by our own misunderstandings. And this allows us to actually have the possibility and potential for real change, because as long as we don't see ourselves or the world or even the issues within the world through the eyes of God, rather than through our own, misshapen lenses, we cannot really make actual progress or true change. So this is why the purification in this world is the most practical and most real thing that we can embark upon. And as you embark upon that purification, and as you embark upon that intrusive self-examination, and as you allow yourself to begin praying for these events, for your own purification, but also for the aid of others, whether it's praying for those going through the afterlife journey, praying for those who have gone through horrific violence. Wherever you are, you're going to have your own particular circumstances. You are drawing your soul into a state of receptivity that allows you to participate in these construct operations. You know, our prayers are visible things in the out-of-body travel state. When you are in the out-of-body travel state, our prayers are visible. It's like lightning bolts going to heaven.
Wow.
When you're praying for somebody, when you're praying for a situation in the world, you are impacting the world. One of the things I hear from, I'm going to tell you this, it's important. People say, you know, well, what about, I hear from people, they say, what about the, nuns or monks who are praying, and shouldn't they be doing this? Shouldn't they be doing that? And it's like,
making more cheese or something.
Yeah, make more cheese. And, and I just have to say, I wish you could see what they do.
Wow.
Because they are literally like beacon points on the earth. Those monasteries are holding earth together. They are the ones that hold heaven to earth and are keeping us all from literally
blowing apart. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
wow.
So we want to remember how important that prayer is. But go ahead. Sorry.
No. You can keep going, but I think what you've been saying is really just super exciting for anyone who wonders why they're on this earth and that things are so dark and what's the point. That we have, each one of us has an amazing mission, an opportunity. Like we're literally spiritual superheroes in our own right, and that we cannot underestimate the power of our prayer, the power of love, and therefore we have a responsibility to be very efficient with our time and use it wisely. And I think that's the practical aspects of what we're talking about.
Well, and this is, what you just said is so important as well. The power of love, the emanation of a human heart that is emanating love outward to the universe is also a visible thing. So, when we're talking about construct and destruct, the energy of hatred and the energy of love, those are visible things in the out-of-body travel state. And so literally what we have to remember is that we are what we emanate.
Yeah.
We are what we emanate.
Yeah.
And if you literally are standing in love, you are doing something. If you are standing in hate, you are doing something. And you have to think about which one you want to be doing, Now, you were talking too about how do we become conscious? There are a lot of ways to become conscious, and a lot of it has to do with a lot of the things I've just laid out, but it also has to do with a lot of little things that you're going to do to start paying more attention. When we talk about that circle, the spheres that come together,
mm-hmm.
you want to realize you've got a multidimensional existence that perceives reality from a multidimensional sphere. And ironically, when you close your eyes, when you're going to sleep, that's going to lock in. So as you are traveling at night, you are literally, it's like you cut out this world, you're cutting into the next. And so you have to become aware of wanting and being willing to remember what you're experiencing at night. One of the ways you do this is remember that as you're waking in the morning, the moment you open your eyes, you're going to start forgetting it.
Right.
So as you come upon consciousness in the morning, you're going to want to keep your eyes closed and have a notepad, because it's a very different, it may be very vivid when you're first awaking, but that's because you are connected and locked into that multidimensional. the minute you open your eyes, you are locking out of that and locking into the physical. And that's my little snap sound. Then you snap, and then that consciousness of it changes. And so some of that memory can be lost. Now, when you're talking about a fully conscious out-of-body experience, right now we're kind of talking about people becoming more aware of their dreams. But when you have a fully conscious out-of-body experience, it's going to be as conscious as you and I talking now. Sometimes it's much more conscious than our physical waking reality.
Yeah.
And when people have a fully conscious experience, it's so powerful and so real. There's absolutely no question that they've had one. So when people will say, well, how do I know? And I'll tell you, if you've had a fully conscious experience, you don't need to ask me. You already know you did.
You did, yeah.
But people do have aspects of, various levels of consciousness, of memory. And there is nothing, remembering aspects of the dreaming world is also helpful, because we are spoken to through our dreaming states as well. And we're given messages through our dreaming states. Yeah. But what does happen is that when you have that fully conscious experience, it really kind of jolts you awake, because you all of a sudden realize there is a completely separate consciousness that is separate and apart from this physical world that you can no longer deny. It's that powerful. And I hear, I just heard that a few days ago from someone who had that mind-blowing awakening experience. And so it's always good to be reminded from other people as they're going through it for the first time, so I can reiterate it and tell other people. But what is really important here is all of these things put together. And then there's a lot of details, like what you're going to be doing with prayer and meditation. One of the things that people need to do with meditation, because you want to be in a state of receptivity. So when you're praying, you're activating your mind, and you want to do the prayer because that's really important, because it's informing your purification process. It's creating that link with the heavenly flow that comes with the angels and the seraphim from heaven to earth. It's a circular flow. But you also need to have time, and a lot of time, that you dedicate to literally just becoming an empty mind, where God can communicate with you. And the reason why this is so important is not just communication itself, it's the energy. And this was something I actually had just a few nights ago. I was specifically given this message for one of my spiritual counseling students about how important this is, in the fact that a big part of this progression that we undergo in the out-of-body states, and of course that begins with it starting to happen fully consciously, but then it progresses, we go through mystical training, so to speak. A huge part of this is the energy that is brought down from heaven into our spirit within our body. What I was shown was how important it was that this particular individual was cutting the meditation off too quickly. And it was really important that he do not do that. And the reason why was because there's this residual, they're bringing in a higher vibration. And the big, huge vibration is coming in the beginning parts. And he would cut it off when it was waning down. But it was really important not to cut it off until those vibrations and all of that was completely funneled through to its end point. And this is because the energy that is brought in is literally the fuel, the spiritual fuel that is informing his journey. And that's what happens with each one
Wow.
of us. So we want to allow that energy to come in. One of the things I explained to this particular student was, when we do that particular type of meditation, we want to literally empty. You can use a mindfulness type of meditation for that. You can focus on the breath. But what you're going to find is that if you try to think or do any type of technique, you're going to engage your thought process, and it breaks
it. Yeah.
You want to completely just allow yourself to, and one of the nice things about mindfulness is that if thoughts arise, you acknowledge them and you let them go. So you don't freak out if you're having thoughts, because that's the nature of the mind. However, you don't want to engage with them, because you are focusing on being clear for energy to come through.
And I think we have St. Francis and St. Clare of Lisieux, who are examples of make me an instrument of your peace. I abandon myself. I empty myself. Therefore, I am complete by emptying myself. I mean, it's a paradox, right?
Beautiful, Mark. I love it. Yes, I'm sure you know how much I love St. Clare of Assisi.
Yeah,
I have her in every room of my house, of course, and St. Francis as well. And St. Clare is, St. Clare was a perfect example of literally being a vessel for heaven to simply funnel, and she was a beacon of light in terms of constant prayer, storming heaven. She was, that's what she did. She was always in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament, and there was a huge power in St. Clare.
Wow.
Of this, and it's another spiritual counseling client that I had was kind of knocking herself. She felt like, gee, I don't really do very much. I was like,
you're storming heaven, honey. Yeah.
I'm like, this is a very prayerful, very wonderful person, wonderful woman.
Wow.
And I said, okay, well, I want you to think of St. Clare, who she happens to know how obsessed I am with her. I literally have a little statue of St. Clare in every room of my house. I do.
I bet you do. Yeah.
I do, because St. Clare is I consider her my patron.
Wow.
I said, I want you to think about St. Clare. What did she do? She sat in prayer. And, that's what she did.
Mm.
And look what she is to heaven.
Right. So I'm happy you mentioned St. Clare. I was also thinking of St. Therese of Lisieux, and also her beautiful vocation of love. Let me ask this question, again, on a practical level. So we have the capacity to pray, and you're saying that if we actually saw what was going on when we pray, and I know I've experienced the efficiency of prayer. If I just ask, it's given immediately. In fact, if I overthink it, it's gone, right? So when people say, when I say I will pray for you or pray for somebody, I know the efficiency of that. Boom, it's given, and Jesus says that too. So in the conscious state, we have a sense of the efficiency and efficacy of prayer, but in the out of body travel, so the Saint Clare, when she's sleeping, she's presumably also, maybe she was or wasn't aware of the impact she's having in that subconscious, in that dream state, in that out of body state. Are there, what would you say is the difference or dynamic between the waking prayer state and this out of body? And then the subsequent question to that is, if we can do work in the out of body condition, we could literally go to places, affect conflict areas. We can, with love, with as our friend Linda Saba says, you can, with the power of the precious blood, you can do amazing things when you call upon it. So we have this, both opportunities in the waking state and in the sleep state to do this spiritual work.
Absolutely. And, you know, St. Clair and St. Therese both had very powerful experiences with, you know, our Blessed Mother and our Lord. You know, St. Clair, you know, both of them experienced great tribulations in illness. And I wanted to point out, you know, speaking of someone, one of my spiritual counseling clients who is, you know, a little bit hindered by physical impairment. And, you know, so many people who have physical illnesses think they don't, you know, they don't have any worth. St. Padre Pio spoke a lot about the sick and the power of the sick, and so did Mother Teresa. You know, and Mother Teresa utilized the people who were ill to be her greatest prayer warrior.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Did. And so, you know, St. Therese and St. Clair were also sick. And St. Therese had beautiful visions with the Blessed Mother. And St. Clair, she was so sick, she was unable to attend Mass on Christmas Day. And she had this beautiful experience where she awoke in her cell, and the baby Jesus in the manger came to life, and the Blessed Mother allowed her to hold the living Christ child.
Wow.
And so, you know, there's a lot that can be said on these things, but boy, do I want to point out, yes, not just, there is so much work to be done. You know, we are raising an army of spiritual warriors of love.
Yeah.
That is very literal. I'm writing a book that's going to talk about it. I'm writing it right now. It's the third in a series, the Redemption series. The first two books are out, The Limb of the Redemption and The Christ of the Redemption. The one I'm working on right now is called The Lord of the Redemption. But we are speaking in particular of these warriors of light, that we are raising this spiritual army. And I've written books about this as well before. In particular, Medicine Woman Within a Dream, which is book 3 of the Mysteries of the Redemption series, talks about the whole process wherein we learn in the out-of-body travel state how to alter reality.
Wow.
And how that happens is, you know, there's a place that I call the management realm, which is where events begin to manifest from our thoughts and from our actions before they hit the ground. And this is where the angelic realm, and also where out-of-body travelers and spiritual warriors are taken to alter outcomes for individuals and people, as well as mass events or larger events, in cases where God has deemed it necessary to protect people from their own mistakes, you know,
Yeah.
which, you know, we have all been the recipient and the beneficiaries of, you know, and it's very powerful because it's not just, you know, I've gone in and prevented people from being murdered, people from dying in accidents where they would have died before their time. But we also go in and we work with the way people are thinking. When people are not thinking correctly and they're not thinking from a place of love, and they're unable to see what they need to see about one of their loved ones, or about a situation. We work with the minds of people who are involved in events that involve many people, where people are not seeing the humanity of their brothers and sisters who may not agree with them in various issues. And so this is huge. You know, we also go in to provide comfort for people who have lost loved ones who are grieving. We go in to provide help to souls who have died suddenly in a plane crash or in a terrorist event or a mass shooting. Many times in those kinds of cases, people are surprised and are in need of a lot of assistance because they, they may not even realize that they have died. So they need
Right.
And there are a lot of things that we work in energy, and you can read a lot of detail about this. We do a lot of spiritual warfare with the angels and the demons. And, I have several books on this. You go through and you go in and you can actually also work with ghosts and lost souls who are haunting places. And this is the realm where you go in and you're able to communicate with them and find out why they're stuck where they are.
Yeah, they're stuck. Yeah.
Yeah. And what they need from you in terms of either understanding or what it is that's holding them there. And then, we are infused when we are traveling in the out-of-body travel state. First of all, you go through what I call the mystical training. You're trained as you're going. You learn how to participate in these endeavors. So if you are called to work like this, you will go and undergo mystical training. But then you are also infused. So it's an interesting experience because this wisdom doesn't necessarily come from you. Most of the time it doesn't. It's like the Holy Spirit infuses you with the right words to say at that time, the words that soul needs to hear. And you might really sound really wise and stuff. And, but it's not your wisdom. It's not my wisdom. It's the Holy Spirit working through and, through me. And so, you are infused. It's a very beautiful thing. I've seen places where I've been taken and, seen, group hauntings where there's many, many souls because souls often gather where there's a proclivity, some type of similarity. And you go to a place and there might be 50 or 100 souls and they're causing a haunting or whatever. And so then you have to kind of do a group release to get them to go to
group hug. Yeah.
But there's nothing more beautiful than one of those. Because literally you will have seraphim lining the skies because you are literally going to be infused with the word of knowledge and wisdom that you need for each soul. And then you take that soul and you are launching them up. And there's at least 10 angels, literally like one on each side, across from each other, because they're all individually taking those souls as you're sending them up to help them to the it's beautiful. Yeah. You can't even imagine.
You can't. I mean, but I have to, I know it's a very personal story. We can edit it out if we want, but I recall you asking me when your father passed away, right, that he experienced Padre Pio came to him and then we helped.
No, I don't have any problem with keeping that story. That's amazing.
No, but when you said, well, let's go and do some work, and I think you said let's pray him out of limbo, out of purgatory, and I said, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll just hope it works.
Well, what happened was, my father he was a Mormon most all of his life. I was a convert to Catholicism in the year 2000. Mm-hmm. One of the things Padre Pio had said, and I love Padre Pio. Padre Pio had said that once he accepted somebody as their spiritual child, he would accept every member of their family. And he took on this responsibility. He said that he would not enter. It was kind of like the Bodhisattva vow, that he would not enter heaven until every member of that family was taken to heaven. And
wow.
So, I think it was in like 1997 or 1998, I was praying and asking Saint Padre Pio to accept me as his spiritual child. And of course, he passed away in like 1968.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm asking him in the spirit, since he's passed on, and I've been very honored and blessed to have had quite a few experiences with Padre Pio. And at one point he told me the actual date that he had already accepted me and my family, and it was in 1995. So it had been, I think it was in
Wow.
November of 1995. So he had already accepted my family, me and my family. So when my father died about 10 years ago, it was in 2010, my father had passed away, and he knew nothing of Padre Pio. And it was so because he came to me like it was a few days or a week after his passing, and he described this man, this guy in the brown robe and the white beard, and who is this guy? And I'm like, why are you asking? And he said, well, this guy showed up and he fought for me he fought for my father in the tribunal with God.
Wow.
He defended him. And my father ended up then being allowed. My father had some things in his life that were a little difficult. That needed some defense, I guess. And I remember telling him that I think that was Padre Pio. And I told him about who Padre Pio was. And then I started seeing my father in purgatory, and he was working through. So, sometimes what happens is that we have to defend I've seen this with many souls where sometimes it's a defense of if someone has, done some pretty serious things.
Yeah.
Sometimes the argument is whether or not you're just going into a lower hell realm, or whether or not God's going to allow you to go into a lower purgatory and work on purifying. And my father literally went into one of the lowest purgatories. And I remember the first few times
he deserved it.
when I went into some of those purgatories, it was kind of rough, because it was like, wow, this is kind of a bummer having to come here. But we were able to move him, and he's in some neat places now. And what this shows, and I've seen this with many other souls too, is when in Sister Faustina's revelation, where Jesus says, "Mercy is my greatest attribute." Mm-hmm. That is what I have seen. Well, mercy is Jesus' greatest attribute.
And we talked about that divine chaplet of mercy, right? That prayer that was given to her Sister Faustina, Saint Faustina.
Yes, and that's one of the prayers that I offer for the dying and the deceased, as well as like the office of the dead, and the rosary, the way of the cross, and other things that are some of our Catholic prayers. But there are other things that people can utilize in their own traditions as well.
Yeah.
But what happens is when we emanate that love, we make construction, movement forward possible, not just for ourselves, but for others.
Right. So I want to read from our just fresh in from the fan mailbox on my my dumb phone. My friend Michelle, who is a dear friend, I just met her in Washington when I was there a few months ago, and she said, "I just listened to your podcast with Marilynn, and it was awesome." Ingrid, my coach or spiritual counsel, said it's going to give you goosebumps. So Michelle is not like, I know she thinks about angels, I think, but I don't know what she is in terms of her Christian, if she's even Christian. Okay. Ingrid said, Padre Pio was with me and I need to research him. You mentioned him on the podcast. I think this podcast is a good introduction to woo-woo for someone.
I'm getting goosebumps.
I know, mainly because the indigenous peoples' core beliefs being so similar with no contact with each other. So that was her comment. And I said, wow, Padre Pio, he is one of the most important saints and the longest living stigmatus. Marilynn gave me a rosary that was once touched to Padre Pio's bloodied hand wrap.
Yep.
I carry that rosary every day. So there you go. Isn't that crazy?
Well, the thing that's cool, it's not crazy to me because, what I've seen is that Padre Pio is a busy guy since he crossed over. He's been a busy guy, probably busier than he was even in his life. And he was busy during life, and he's, Padre Pio, he's come to me and it's so hard to put into words, but he's come to me and he's kicked my butt.
Yeah, and then, I was going to say he's kicked your ass. I know.
He's done that. But he's also showered love on me at times. And then I remember one of the things I'll never forget. I tried to paint it, but as you know, my paintings are, I just try.
We're hacks. Yeah.
I tried to paint it because it's one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had, which was when Padre Pio showed me what the Holy Mass appeared as in the mystical heavens. And there were 54 steps from heaven, from earth to heaven. And he took me and he allowed me to witness this. And, we were then, there were these steps. So we were following, and he was like, it was so holy that I was afraid to speak. I didn't want to say anything.
Well, we remember, right? His masses would take, 2-3 hours sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like 5 a.m. or something.
When we got to the final step of the Mass, he and I were in this cave. He was holding up the blessed host, and there was this it was coming to life. The host was coming to life. There was sparkly light surrounding the host, and the entire cave became as if animated with the life of Christ. And I so wanted to ask him all these questions, but I knew it was just such a holy moment that saying anything would just be wrong. It would be blasphemy at that moment. And it was just so amazing. And so I've had a real array of experiences with Padre Pio. I remember one of the first ones was I'll tell you this one because this is a good one because it helps people realize that the spiritual path isn't easy for any of us, so don't feel bad. I remember I was going to, there was this beautiful place. There were these golden confessionals in a cathedral in the sky. And there was a line of people coming to see Padre Pio. And I was at the back of the line and waiting. And he was talking to each one. And I'm like, whoa, I'm so excited. Oh my gosh, and I'm going to go see him in these beautiful golden confessionals that, if you just touch them, it's like your whole body is electrified with the love of God, And I go up to him and he just kind of looks at me and it's kind of like, looks me up and down, like with this disapproving glance, this glare, and I'm like, oh no. And he says to me, your practices, they're okay. They're all right, And I'm like, and but he just expresses to me, that basically my practices were really, really lame. And that, it was kind of like I was just doing just enough to get by, but he could see right through me and I just sucked, and I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And, that was one of the times, this was like 15, 20 years ago, where, I came out of it, I felt like so, crappy about myself, but he infused into me an understanding that I really had to deepen my daily practices, my prayer, my meditation. I thought I really did believe that I was doing good. You know what I mean? I thought, okay, I'm doing pretty good. But it was like, it was really lame. You know what I mean? It was just so lame. And it
Wow.
was, wow, okay. It's like, I'm really just not cutting the grade at all. I mean, because he was looking at me so disapprovingly, and it was, really, really a tough moment, but a good moment, because these are the moments that change your life. When I talk about the purification, it's when things are shown to you and they are energetically infused into you, so you understand what it is you need to do different. And that's how this purification takes place. I wouldn't have understood that in any other way, because I was doing things according to like the rule and the law of the church. And according to the rule and the law of the church, it was great, but it was apparent that God wanted more from me. I wasn't giving God enough. And so I needed this moment where this was infused into me, and it was very clear to me that it was not enough. It was not what God wanted of me. And it was infused in a way that made it very clear.
Yeah.
I remember there were many experiences I had with him after that. And then there was one point after I had finished writing 2 books. It was The Forgotten Mystics and Comparative Religious Mystical Theology. And he was really happy with me. And I will never forget it, because he snuck around the corner. I was in a church, and it was a little church with wooden confessionals. It was very, a humble church, not the golden ones. And he snuck around the corner, and he gave me a big hug, and he emanated all of this love and stuff, and he made it very clear he was very happy with those 2 works. And so, in these out-of-body experiences, everything, we are infused with wisdom about our path, things we are to do. All of the books that I've ever written, and I've written a lot of them, there's like over 90. Every title of those books was given to me in an out-of-body travel state. I don't make the titles up myself. They're given to me.
Wow.
And, and in the contents, I don't think that I would have ever been able to write anything of my own accord. And so literally it's given to me in the out-of-body travel state. And, another thing I really want to touch on too, we talked about how important this emanating love is, and how it relates to karma and resolution of conflicts and things like this. One of the things that's real important as well to at least bring up, because this is something that people run into on a daily basis in their practical life, is that, practically sometimes we wish for resolution of something, and other parties may not wish to give it. And what we are then called to do is we have several levels of what we're called to do, because sometimes there's an issue of, having to engage in some kind of spiritual protection. Sometimes there's spiritual warfare involved, but we still want to do what we can to come from a place of love. But we also then, and this is where out-of-body travel and this mystical influx can inform our decision-making and our understanding of individual interactions, where we will understand those proper boundaries in given situations. And, this happens as well, because we do have the battles between good and evil in this world. And we have that within our families, within our friends. But, we also have it in world events, so we have, people have to deal with issues like, terrorism, mass shootings. And these are situations that involve true evil. And ironically, that is something that is also, I was taught a lot about this. It's covered a lot in Absolute Disillusion of Body and Mind and the Mystical Jesus, as to understanding evil and how we deal with evil.
Yeah. Can I just pause you for a second there, because as you know, I'm a big fan of Richard Rohr, and recent fan, and reading his book Universal Christ and listening to his podcast called "And a Name for Everything," or Another Name for Everything. That's what he wanted to call the book, and the publisher said, "Call it Universal Christ." But what struck me is he seems to give evil kind of a pass, which is interesting, because when they're in dialogue with two of the young hosts, and it's not very. I mean, you've talked about that direct encounter and experiences, but he doesn't dismiss the existence of the devil or Satan, but it's almost like he lets it pass too easily, and that's the part that's kind of got me a little bit, given that his center for action and contemplation is it's a beautiful place, clearly, and he has a very important message of the universal Christ, is a very important message, and may heal a lot of the longstanding schism between the Eastern and Western churches, and but I am a bit concerned that giving evil a pass is, or not, maybe because he hasn't had direct experience, but I just found it interesting.
Well, also to clarify, I love Richard Rohr as well, and I'm a big fan of him as well. And I haven't read that book, so I can't speak to it in particular. But I can say that giving evil a pass is a very, very dangerous thing to do, and is a big part of how we have arrived at the place that we are in the world today. And it's very important that we realize this.
Mm-hmm.
We've been giving evil a pass for a good. Well, we've been doing it forever, but we've been doing it in a heightened way for the last 50 to 100 years, which is leading to a state that is going to be and is. It's already there. It's already happening. Where we are allowing evil as a result.
Right.
Because we refuse to identify it. If you refuse to identify evil, then you are allowing it. And the reality is evil exists. It's a presence. It's a power. The principalities of good and evil exist. They are very powerful.
Yeah.
And we cannot give them a pass. For people who are interested in understanding this better, I do have quite a few books on it. The Mystery of Redemption covers it, but I also have one in the Mystic Knowledge series specifically called Spiritual Warfare, Angels and Demons.
Yeah, I remember. I've read it. It's chilling, but it's important to appreciate the power of evil and the existence of evil spirits, and even if we only experience them in the spiritual realm, but they do manifest. And so, I think when we talk about one of the subjects, and I'll let you keep going, but that question I have is on the power of, like, the ability for strategic prayer, of focused prayer, of the power of love, and being very strategic in this strategy, right? Is right. One thing I've longed to talk to others about, because I think I could see it's possible, of course, but I don't always find allies in saying, okay, let's go. Let's, what are we going to do? What are we going to pray into? Maybe that's the wrong word, but we're going to, pray with directed love. And we know that heaven will rejoice, and the angels will be on our side. We never doubt that. But if we're reluctant to believe that, then nothing happens, right? So what is it that heaven will be pleased by in that kind of strategic prayer?
Well, I mean, really, especially in the Catholic tradition, there are so many prayers that are, prayers and, novenas.
Yeah, very.
Things that are totally pleasing to God. But the thing that always strikes me the most, and is the liturgy of the hours. And the reason why, I wrote a book about it called The Primordial Seed, which explains why, and you'll understand when you read it. Again, you can download these for free at outofbodytravel.org. The primordial seed goes into the fact that there is this circular prayer, which goes all the way back to before the beginning of time, and it is this prayer of the hours, and this is the link between heaven and earth. And this is what the nuns and the monks and the priests pray daily. This is what they're doing, that is lifting up their prayers to heaven. And this is one of the things that when we pray with it, we are joining with them in their chorus of prayer with the angels. And so that's one thing I think is one of the most powerful things, is to join in that circular prayer, which is literally holding heaven to earth. But, there are so many, I like to do novenas, and I've mentioned all the other, things like the Chaplet of the Divine Mercy and the Holy Rosary and the Way of the Cross. And I do lots of these different things, these different devotions, and they're all efficacious. And so, it's okay to see what you personally feel drawn to and called to. And then one of the ways that I will often do it, I like the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary as well. And oftentimes when I'm praying these things, I will set an intention before I begin the prayers. And sometimes, my intention will be as simple as, I am praying this for your intentions, Lord. Your intentions. And what we need to remember then, we can simplify, because what's happening, and going back to giving evil a pass. I want to point a couple of things out here, because when we are praying intentions for the Lord, we are moving the energy forward. That's what we are trying to do. When we are giving evil a pass, we are allowing forces to continue to try to push things backward. And that's destruction. And every time a young person or a person is taken over by an evil spirit and they decide they're going to go do a mass shooting, you are dealing with a mass deconstruct action on the earth that has horrible ramifications that resonate and ripple out to not just where it happens, but to people all over our own country and the world.
Right.
And so everything that any one of us does that is moving the energy forward and towards the good, whether it's through our prayer or even our actions, is doing the same. And so we want our ripples to be of the light.
Right.
And so we have to realize the seriousness. And this is something that's been going on for a while. And there's a lot of what do you call it? Just ways of thinking that people are throwing out, where because it may not be popular or it's uncomfortable for some to deal with the demonic, or because just like you started out this show, Mark, with that it's so hard to believe that people have these experiences, but I'm just going to throw it out there because I am one of those who has these experiences, and I also communicate with other people who have the same.
Yeah.
The reality is that people who start having these experiences are eventually called into spiritual warfare, and we're all seeing the same things. And the demonic is real, and we have a responsibility to be truthful about it. And our responsibility is to tell all of you all that whether you're not comfortable with it or not is not my problem. My problem is to get you all to realize that it's not okay that people are comfortable with ignoring evil,
Right.
allowing it to become an accepted force in humanity, that even the good don't recognize it. Because you are not only, every time there's a mass shooting or there is a mass killing because of a terrorist organization like ISIS, or there is acts of war because of some evil mind doing something that is whatever. You are dealing with not just multiple souls who are being cut off from their own personal destiny. You are dealing with people who are going backwards. The perpetrators of these acts are very often being taken over by darker entities to perpetrate an action which will literally cause a total destruction of their soul. Their soul will go backwards. So whatever progress they have made is going to become defunct. And the karma of that action is going to rebound upon everyone who commits the same act and copycats it. So to make that real simple, the people who committed the Columbine shootings, who started this whole idea of mass shootings, are sharing in the karma of every single mass shooting that has happened ever since. Every single one of those people overseas, the Kosovo Liberation Army, who started beheading people in the 90s, share the karma of the ISIS fighters who continue to behead people now and who beheaded people 10 years ago. And what this is doing is creating a huge backwards thrust of black energy that is turning mankind towards evil, and we are responsible for it. We cannot give it a pass. If we do, we are responsible for that. And it doesn't matter if we're uncomfortable with it. We are responsible for it, and we must stand.
Wow, that was powerful. I'm losing my gravity. No, no, but I think that your point is well taken. If one can always say, if one can't say I didn't know, that once you're aware, whether you experience, a lot of us don't experience these things directly. Some of us see those evil things, but we can't say we didn't know, and that we didn't have an opportunity to do something about it, to rebuke it, to pray against it.
Right. Well, and there's an example here that we can take from Scripture. Back in when there was the vision in the Old Testament where the soul was taken into hell, and he said, "Let me go back and tell my brothers." And God said to him, "No, if they don't listen to the prophets, they won't listen to you." And the reality is that you got to listen to the people who are being shown. And I'm not the only one being shown. There are many more of us, and we are all being shown. And we are telling you what it is. And there's a reason why we're being shown it, and there's a reason why we need to tell it. And it's because mankind needs to remember what we were told in the time of Christ, which there is a battle between principalities and powers, and we are part of it. And we have to choose who we stand for, and the lukewarm will be spit out.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't get to stand on the fence. If we claim to be Catholics, if we claim to be Christians, we better be hot. And we better be ready to fight for Christ.
Yeah. Wow. Oof. Well, I think that, so we've been at this for an hour and a half or so.
We do have a tendency to do that, don't we?
Well, we just go off like there's no map left. But maybe we can wrap up this one. And so we did start with the question, what is out of body, and I think you've taken us on a fantastical journey? Sometimes when you speak, it's like, well, no, it's as normal as getting in the car and using Google Maps to drive somewhere. And
Yeah.
I just went there, and yeah, it was easy as riding a bicycle. And so thank you for sharing that. That was fantastic.
You're welcome. And I will leave this with a really beautiful experience just to top off, since we left with kind of a little bit of a harrowing message. I want to leave with a beautiful one.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of nights ago, I had this wonderful, beautiful experience. I was with Pope John Paul II, and he was sitting in this field of flowers, and there were thousands of flowers, and every single one of them was a different kind of flower. None of them were the same. And he wanted me. He was sitting there, and there was all this greenery and the flowers, and it was just really peaceful and beautiful. And he was wearing his white robe with his white skull cap, and he wanted me to pick 30 of those flowers, and they all were, they were all of a different genus to plant, to plant within my soul. So he had me scurrying around picking these beautiful flowers that were, fruits of the spirit, that I don't currently have not yet blossomed, and I must needs be blossoming. And it was so neat because literally there was not a duplication amongst this beautiful garden. They were all, every single flower was a different genus. It was a different flower. These were heavenly flowers. They were all these different beautiful pastel colors, and enlivened colors, because in the heavens they're always like this enlivened,
iridescent almost, yeah.
Iridescent, yes, and brighter than what we see here.
Wow.
And it was just so cool because every single flower was a completely different species of flower.
Incredible.
So he was just kind of laughing there and giggling about, I want you to pick 30. And so hopefully I will be planting those flowers and bursting forth with some new fruits of the spirit soon.
Yes. I thought we had a short list already, but maybe there's 30 or more.
Hopefully.
Or as many as the
plan. That's my hope. But it was just really beautiful, and it was so cute too, because he was just giggling and laughing, because I was usually like, well, which ones should I pick? I don't know. They're all so different, And he was kind of finding the whole thing kind of comical,
Yeah.
There you go. Something to lighten the mood after our harrowing warning.
Thank you. You took us, to the gates of hell and back.
Yes.